Hi there. Welcome to the Health Analytic Insights podcast. I'm your host, Elena Esty. I have my master's in Biomedical Engineering, and I created this podcast to discover a community of individuals who are passionate about the field of healthcare analytics and health informatics. If this resonates with you, don't forget to follow and subscribe to this podcast, as I'll be uploading new episodes bi-weekly. With the Health Analytic Insights podcast, I hope to share information and advice in topics such as health informatics, digital health, biomedical engineering, and data visualization in healthcare. And in exchange, I would love to hear from you, dear listener, about your experience and interest in this field. You can drop me a line at healthanalyticinsights@gmail.com, and this reference, along with any references discussed during this podcast episode, will be listed below in the show notes. In this episode of the Health Analytic Insights podcast, I'm so grateful that I have my friend Kyle Krüger to discuss his experience and journey going through biomedical engineering. In the first episode of the Health Analytic Insights podcast, titled The Good, Bad, and Ugly of Biomedical Engineering, I gave my own experience of being a biomedical engineering student and my advice. In this episode, Kyle is going to give his advice, and I hope this will be valuable for biomedical engineering students currently going through the program. Without further ado, let's get into it. Thank you, Kyle, so much for being a part of the podcast. And my first question for you is, what got you interested in biomedical engineering?
My name is Kyle Krüger. I studied biomedical engineering together with Alana at the University of Guelph in Canada. Since then, I've moved a little bit out of the more traditional practice of engineering. I've been working more as in software and in data. What got me into the field of biomedical engineering itself before studying was, I think, mostly my environment that I grew up in. I spent a lot of time around small projects, grew up outside of the city, kind of a more stereotypical engineering or engineers background, I think, where we were always either working on some sort of garden project, putting up a pool, making a shed, or working on cars or something. So it gave a bit of this attitude towards being very solutions focused and a more pragmatic approach to life. But then on the other hand, growing up, there were always some people with maybe permanent injuries in our circle of friends and family, and it seemed kind of interesting that for these problems there weren't so many pragmatic, really simple approaches, was to help improve the quality of life for these folks who had some injuries, problems with their knees, with their shoulders, backs, partial blindness, or other lifelong injuries.
Yeah, I feel like I also have that mindset why I got into biomedical engineering. It just seems like there are so many healthcare problems out there, and it just seems like we're always applying the same tools, the same procedures to solving healthcare problems. And I feel like there's so much creative solutions that we could apply that might not just be, the same old school. So that's what really got me into biomedical engineering. I thought that I could be like on the cutting edge of that research and that innovation. So you said that what really got you into it was, your drive for problem solving. And I remember when we did our 4th year capstone project, and it was like, had nothing to do with biomedical engineering. It was really about wastewater treatment and things like that. So what was your thoughts about that project? And, now being in the working environment, do you think that it's completely different? Do you think that that was a feasible approach to what we took with our 4th year project?
Well, I don't think the theme of our 4th year project was very useful in getting into the private sector or getting some sort of job based on the theme that we had. But the type of teamwork that we had to have there to solve that problem or design a wastewater treatment tool, it really was quite similar to how things ended up being in the workplace later on for me, at least in startups. There was always a very interdisciplinary team, and that's the kind of experience that we got from that capstone project, was working on an interdisciplinary team. There wasn't so much for us that was necessarily tied into what we specialized in for biomedical engineering. The overall practice that there is for solving design problems was the same.
No, I totally agree. I feel like from engineering, what I got wasn't necessarily the skills that I use in my job, but definitely the interdisciplinary approach, having to have all those different group projects and working with people from different backgrounds, I found that was probably the best part of engineering and what I found was most transferable in the working world. But just speaking a bit more to your path in biomedical engineering, was there any time during your degree that you wanted to go into something like, environmental engineering or software engineering, or were you just really a pure biomedical engineering student?
I definitely had some times where I thought about switching, especially as in the public eye, there was a lot more pressure starting to get put onto environmental problems. And I felt like, some of these medical things that we were dealing with were nice to have, but not really exactly what was needed the most around us. But the situation we find ourselves in now with Corona, at least that kind of changes a bit. You see that what's needed in society is always changing, and even if you do decide to kind of change direction, at least you can take those more general skills with you to work on other problems. Like the work I've been doing since I graduated wasn't really so much into biomedical engineering for the first years. It was mostly software development, followed by a bit of signals processing and getting into kind of heartbeat detection for a mobile ECG product. But to get back to your question, if I wanted to go into a different direction, yeah, there was definitely some pull towards the environmental side or the electrical engineering side too, because I had some student jobs and internships that were more in that sector. The relevance of that specialization seemed a lot more relevant based on my student work that I was getting. The biomedical engineering courses remained really interesting at the same time, learning about how, say, an MRI works, working on medical signals processing. It still was more intriguing to me than learning the details about how different microcontrollers are built or what types of small electrical devices are being used to build up a computer.
No, and I feel the same way as well too. I've always kind of had that pull towards the healthcare field, even regardless of what other things are happening in the world. Like I've always just wanted to come back to the healthcare field, even if I've taken a break from it. I've always just had a drive, I think, just to, I guess, find some solution within that field. But you've had a really, really interesting career since you've left, graduated from biomedical engineering. You've done like some freelance work?
Yeah, when I first graduated, I was kind of set on moving to Germany. I had done a summer language course in Berlin when I was a student in my last summer, and I kind of fell in love with the culture that they have here in Europe, the kind of diversity that is to be found without traveling so far. You can go to a different country where people are speaking a different language. You have much different landscapes, and the infrastructure that makes it possible to do these kind of quick trips to see other cultures and diversity felt very different to Canada. Canada's huge. There's a lot to see there as well, but I always felt like you had to travel for ages, and the buses weren't so well connected, and the contrast to that being in Europe made me want to come here. When I was looking at moving here, I had trouble figuring out what kind of job my degree could actually help me get when I arrived. There wasn't a direct translation for value of my degree. Here in Germany, they have much more specialized engineering programs where they get a degree, it seems, that really is, say, for biomedical engineering once they've graduated. Whereas when we graduated, sure, we studied biomedical engineering, we had a specialization in it, but our degrees at the end of the day, they said it was a Bachelor of Engineering. And for them, that here in Europe seemed kind of vague, I think. And coming into the working market, I had trouble then selling myself to the private sector for full-time employment. And then I thought it was just easier to go into freelance and pick up small contracts, because at that point, the businesses make a bit less of an investment in you. In that sense, you sign up for one project. If you succeed at that project, great, you can take some more contracts. Also, it sets them free from a lot of the kind of employment protection that you have in Germany. It's much stronger than in Canada, where if you become a full-time employee here, it's very hard for them to get rid of you even if you're not performing. So it makes it safer for them not knowing where I was coming from if I was working freelance. And it also gave me a chance to build up skills that I was missing to fulfill some of the more specialized roles here in my own time. Say some of the software development skills that I didn't get when I was studying. By taking a project-based freelance contract, it forced me to learn those skills in order to fulfill the contract and then at the end of the day get paid. So the freelance for me was less of something that I really wanted to do, but it was just a way of solving the problem on getting employment in a country where my education wasn't very easy to translate.
Mhm. I feel like that was my same issue as well too. And I've talked to a lot of my other friends who've done biomedical engineering, and that's their issue too. Like you graduate and your degree is quite vague. I remember going to a job recruiter, like a recruiter show, and the recruiter asked me like, what even is biomedical engineering? They had no idea what I could do, and I really had to kind of play up the electrical engineering courses that I had taken, like electrical devices and stuff like that, to really give them a sense of what exactly is biomedical engineering. And then I found that applying to jobs wasn't that successful for me, so I went back and did a master's in something more specific. I feel like that's something that might not be advertised as much, that this degree is quite broad, and you might need to find a way to kind of specialize and show employers exactly what skills you've learned from university. But I know it's not easy.
Hey, you're right. It's a much more generalized degree, and
Mm-hmm.
you do have to, I think, learn to sell yourself a little bit better coming out with a Bachelor of Biomedical Engineering, because, like you're saying, the industry doesn't necessarily know what that is yet.
Mm-hmm. What skills have you learned that were completely unexpected after you graduated and actually started finding jobs?
Managing my taxes and time management when being a freelancer. When I first arrived and signed up for freelance, I was able to find some contracts, but I was waiting on a tax ID, which didn't actually let me write out invoices for a few months after I'd arrived. But I had already started working because I knew that the application to be a freelancer was approved. But I ended up in a strange situation where I had to pay in advance my income taxes for a whole quarter on the estimate that I was going to make, which burned through a bit of my savings I was hoping to use to get by after arriving. And then I also wasn't able to actually take any income until that tax ID arrived.
Oh wow.
So it put me into a hairy financial situation, and I really had to try and get the hang of the German tax system in order to come out of it with food in my flat. I even remember a time when I first was dealing with this problem that in the evenings after I was working on my contracts, I would walk through Berlin and grab some deposit bottles and take them to the corner stores to just grab enough cash for a lunch or a dinner, because then that would postpone my savings running a bit low. Strange experience with the tax system and financial management.
Well, you got through it, and I feel like, I don't know, if you want to start your own company in the future or side hustle or something, I feel like you have that knowledge now to know exactly how to maneuver it.
More technically, there's also some kind of computer science skills that were necessary, especially because the freelance contracts I was doing, they started off more in computer science. So I had to learn more traditionally about how to do proper architecture for mobile applications, or then even later for backend software for websites and computer science not computer science, data science development. And now that's the area I find myself more working in professionally, is in the sector of data engineering and data science with the specialty on biomedical engineering.
Oh, very cool. Very. Yeah, in terms of that, I also have found myself that I had to completely do so much learning after university, and I mainly did. I used like online courses to learn things like SQL and R and Python and stuff like that. Did you do your learning on the job, or was it more books and online courses?
So it was a big mix. There was some stuff on the job. One of my first freelance contracts that I had was through a friend, and they mentored me a bit to learn some of the more traditional computer science skills, but then things like learning how to use SQL and work with databases, that was done through online courses typically. And also with some books, I picked up some things that were helpful for that. That one being, for example, I think it was Data Science from Scratch I had picked up in order to get an idea as to everything that's required for a data science project that was more focused on the computer science than the statistics.
Do you think, this is just my own opinion, do you think that going forward, more and more people will choose to learn online? I feel like I've learned so much online from just like YouTube videos, YouTubers, and Coursera and Udemy, instead of paying thousands and thousands of, or maybe I'll pose this question. Do you think that people will choose to study things online once they kind of understand, they have a better sense of what they want to study in their future, then they go to college or university. Do you think that there's going to be more of that in the future? Because I just feel like with my own degree, I feel like it could have. I think I'm more interested in epidemiology, so I feel like if I had a more of a sense of what I was more interested in, then I would go to school and study that instead of spending thousands and thousands on education right away.
Yeah, I think you're onto something there. It makes a lot of sense. I feel that when I was graduating from high school, there was a lot of pressure just to continue, take the next logical step, go to university,
Hmm.
get a degree. So the question was more about what degree do I get rather than what problems I wanted to solve.
Yeah.
Um, I was still in the end happy with the degree I chose. I think I was lucky in that sense, but there's a lot of room for error there, and there's a big leap of faith involved. I think this opportunity people have now to go ahead and take some courses online that are maybe preparation courses for university, or the more traditional routes, which were always available, but I didn't really think of much back then, is doing internships before going to university to kind of find out what your options are. I
Hmm.
think that these are becoming more available to people now because those online courses also point people in that direction of trying out some internships. When people do things like these code camps or whatever else that there is online to be found, then they're usually trying to push people to get into the job market afterwards.
Yeah,
But
because I think I read recently like Amazon and Google are setting up like their own programs where people can go into that, and that's probably like they're just training their own software engineers and their own engineers. You don't even have to potentially spend thousands of dollars to go to school. Like you could probably have an employer invest in your education, and then right away you have a job. I feel like that would be such a such a better option that companies invest in people, invest in these invest in their employees, and then you decide if you want to go to school, college, university later on.
yeah, I think one risky part of some of these online courses is a lot of them tend to be like a form of advertising as well.
Mm-hmm.
Say the Google courses for learning about data science, they're always trying to get you to use their tools. They want you on their cloud
Mm,
platform, and the same goes for AWS online courses.
that's a good point.
It
Yeah.
doesn't always teach you the real foundations. It kind of
Mm-hmm.
gets you sucked into their
Pigeonholed.
tool chain,
Mm-hmm.
which is still not a bad introduction to different fields in general, but it's something to be mindful of when taking
Mm-hmm.
those, that then it's also a form of advertising. And
That's a really
like
good
you were
point.
saying, trying to get their own engineers trained,
Mm-hmm.
it's trying to build a community around their platform, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think it was Google bought the Kaggle platform just over 2 years ago,
Mm-hmm.
and they were mentioning quite openly that they wanted to then use it as well as oh a kind of a training place, a place for people to learn data science skills and then get them into their platform.
Yeah, no, yeah, that's a really good point. So you're not just pigeonholed into one tool. Yeah, definitely be mindful of that.
The university did well is the universities would try to remain more neutral on the types
Mm.
of tools you used,
Mm-hmm.
but they weren't perfect either in that sense. We always used to say one type of 3D design software. There was the SolidWorks
Some of
environment that we
it's like
stuck on, right?
every day. And that's the one problem with universities. I feel like they're not up to date with some of the tools. Like they kind of lag behind. I mean, now they're using R and stuff like that, but like, when have you used MATLAB?
Oh man, I've never used it since. I tried to get one of my employers to get a subscription to it, and they just told me flat out no. So I ended up I found, okay, there's SciPy for Python, and it could do most of the things that MATLAB was doing. So I went over to that. And then R now has a lot of alternatives, or Octave is also something that I remember being talked about while we were in university.
Mm-hmm.
It was the dean of engineering. I remember was really into Octave.
Mm.
And that's something that's still actually a little
Yeah,
bit
that's
active. It's not so bad, but it's definitely not as popular as R or Python,
yeah.
or some growing tools like Julia is
Mm-hmm.
now available in a full version. It's no longer in beta.
Yeah. So my next question was, do you have like a dream career path or dream company that you might want to work in the next few years, or you're still open to whatever path takes you?
So what I'd say is there's two things I want to try and do. First thing, I want to keep trying to work on problems that I think are relevant. I've worked at a few different startups so far, and I've always thought that the project they're trying to do has a good value that it's offering to a user or to a client. And then now that there's been something more catastrophic going on with Corona, I wanted to try and work on problems with that. So I'm changing rails a bit to work at an institute here that deals with measuring the statistics in Germany for Corona infections and tries to make projections on where they need to send patients. And it's the Robert Koch Institute where I should be starting soon. And once the Corona crisis has cooled down, I'm obviously open to something new. I think it's good to switch projects and get more the sort of interdisciplinary experience by switching projects once in a while.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, what I want to say be weary of as I continue on working on projects like this, I think it's quite easy to end up working on something that really is an important problem for somebody else, but doesn't really matter so much for oneself. Sometimes those jobs they can pay well, and there's a reason they pay well. I think is often because there's nobody else who wants to do the work.
Mm-hmm.
To be careful of things like that. I don't know. There's a lot of say recruiters reaching out about projects that really just don't seem that interesting, but they can be tempting. I think when you first graduate to pick up something that isn't really where your passion lies.
Absolutely. As someone who is now works kind of like in the data science area with that biomedical engineering specification, are there any like specific certifications or skills you picked up along the way that you really think are beneficial for people who want to be like in the health informatics, like that kind of space?
Yeah, I think no matter what specialization of biomedical engineering or engineering in general you choose to go into, some more experience with the design process is really valuable. I've encountered a lot more in Europe. There are people who have degrees in industrial design, product design, information design, and user experience design. It's a bit of an industry that I didn't really take note of in Canada so much. That was kind of baked into our engineering program, where each year we had a design course, and it tried to teach us about how to do a product for a user, or tried to research a given problem and come up with a solution for it. But here they have a specialization which really just focuses on that and not so much on the technical side of the problem, which is what engineering seems to be more about. I think learning more about what kind of problems there are and the approaches to come to a solution for them is really valuable to have as an engineer, because it also lets you work more closely with, say, management figures in companies who they have some sort of vision, or they see the problem quite clearly, and to be that person helping them build a solution, you really need to speak their language. And then learning a bit about design, whether it be product design, whether it be user experience design, those things will help you.
Absolutely. I was smiling there because I remember the first engineering project in my year was to basically build like it was like an upcycle project. So we had to take trash and build something out of the trash. And I remember feeling so shafted because I think the next year's group, they like got to build some racing car using a Raspberry Pi. Like I was like, my design project was building trash, and you guys actually got to program stuff.
I was jealous of you guys. I started the year before, and we had to make board games the first year.
Oh,
it got better every year, I'm telling you.
Nonsense. You said a really, really good point about you having to speak the language of management. And I feel like that's something that was kind of lacking in the engineering program, because I feel like we're quite an insular group. I feel like we could have had more interdisciplinary projects with people who are in marketing, those types of degrees, because really understanding the business side when you're working in a company is so important. Understanding how they see things, especially if you're going to build tools for them. Like in my workplace, I build dashboards. So it's really important for me to understand like how the business users will be using the tool, and format my product in a way that they can understand and they can use it. So I feel like that's something that was lacking in the engineering program when it came to our projects, having more of an interdisciplinary approach and reaching out to different students in different programs.
Yeah. And I think it's almost ironic now as well, because I remember when we were studying at Guelph, it was a big sales factor for them on the engineering program we were doing, is that they were very interdisciplinary for the time, and I guess still are in that sense, because at other engineering universities, they were saying that you would stay within your specialization for a lot of these projects. And at least for us, they were trying to mix the types of engineers you were working with. So we were working together with mechanical engineers on our projects and electrical engineering students, or well, I guess we didn't have electrical engineering. We had electronic systems and computing, I think was the equivalent to electrical that we had, and a few other types. But yeah, it would be really cool to take that a step further and actually work directly with business students, because they do have projects that they're working on for their studies as well, that they have to create a pilot business or something in order to pass a class. And why not actually create a prototype out of it and work together with the engineers on the problem? It would be a great learning experience for both parties.
Exactly, absolutely. Another question was, how is your perception of the job market as a biomedical engineering student changed versus actually working in the field? And we kind of touched on this. You kind of have to sell yourself more. You don't really have, I think I kind of had this mentality that, oh, I'm in engineering, I'm going to get a job right away, knowing that I should have humbled myself because I'm not a software engineering student. But I think that selling aspect is something that myself as a biomedical engineering student, I didn't really anticipate that I would have to do once I actually graduated.
Yeah, it definitely came as a bit of a shock as to how the job market was and what kind of positions that I was being sold while I was in Canada. What kind of things were actually available weren't even necessarily in the field of biomedical engineering. I remember one position that came up before I left was to work as a technical sales associate for a company that was producing electrical components. So they wanted engineers to go and do sales shows and interactive demos to sell their products. And it had absolutely nothing to do with biomedical engineering. It was still an engineering job, but it's not at all what I was expecting. And I thought that studying biomedical engineering would put me a lot more into a niche. But so it was just a bit disappointing to not necessarily get as much into a niche that I was very interested in. But then also, on the other hand, it's really cool that then there is an option to broaden the scope. And that way, if you didn't want to stay in biomedical engineering, you can change your mind and try new things. So I think my perception of the job market, yeah, I was shocked at the time. I was really worried about finding a decent job and one that would pay enough money to live more of a comfortable life, because going into engineering, you kind of have also this expectation that's fed to you a little bit by the, say, community. When you go into engineering, a lot of people do it, I think, because the jobs are supposed to earn well to help you be a little bit more comfortable. People would sometimes, I think, choose engineering over more types of liberal arts programs or types of soft sciences, which can actually also earn quite good deals of money. People go into HR at a big company, there's good contracts to be had. But so I was very kind of focused on finding a sort of decent job that belonged to the stereotype. And since now having a little bit of experience in the field, I'm less worried about finding a decent job. I kind of realize there's no shortage of problems to be solved, and you can always fill the skills gap to get to work on those problems you think are cool. You really don't have to travel as much to find a decent job as I had thought. You have to be more flexible on what you want to work on if you want to stay in one place. And if there's no employer offering a job in the field that you want to be doing, you always also have the option of trying to create your own business and apply for research funding to do, say, kind of like a step you did doing a master's. I've met some people in Berlin who they found their own funding for doing a PhD, and I'm not sure necessarily how it is in Canada to be doing a PhD, but here you can earn a fair amount as a student. It's not as much as being in industry, but you can find your own funding and work on exactly that problem that really makes you tick.
Yeah, that's such good advice. Absolutely. Yeah, I really liked what you said. Like, if you're looking for a job and nothing really is interesting to you, there are several options that you can. I feel like being stuck working for a company that you're really not passionate about and that you really hate can really, if you obviously if you need a job for financial support, but if you have that flexibility, not being stuck in a position that you really hate, is definitely, there's other options that you can look at for sure. And yeah, this has been a great conversation. And my last question: what advice would you give a biomedical engineering student who's going through the program right now? What advice would you give them just to get them through if they're going through a rough time, or some things that they should be thinking about as they go through biomedical engineering?
Good question. I think my advice is that to use the full flexibility of the degree once you're through, and also keep in mind some of the things that you might have to learn as a part of the degree that aren't as interesting to you, that you might really struggle through, don't necessarily make a negative impact on your career. I remember I really had some trouble with, say, chemistry. I didn't do very well in anatomy, and there were a few other courses that I just really didn't really give as much effort as they deserved. And if not everything interests you, you can still try to find the jobs that utilize the skills that are based on the courses that you thought were much more intriguing. So don't be turned away or discouraged when you encounter a part of the program that doesn't necessarily speak to your interests very directly.
Yeah, absolutely. And for me, that course was pathology. That was a really difficult course for me. I had no idea what was happening. But yeah, that's been really, really great advice. Thank you for sharing your wisdom. I'm sure this will help a lot of people. And thank you so much for talking to me.
No worries. It was fun.